Hey, how's it going? It's your boy, Adam Moriarty's Challenger Coach here to bring you the 10.8 low-elo update and Q&A video. But wait, there's more. If you aren't already using our desktop app, which you definitely should by the way, you might not have seen our Live Companion 2.0 has launched with a bunch of new features to help you before the game starts. In this update, we've launched matchup-specific advice, which has all the info you need to win lane. You got your team power spikes too, and stats, which lets you see what your team is actually good at in the game, and a full combo section that will give you different ways to use your abilities properly for those moments where you accidentally forgot to swap and you really need to learn how to play a Moo. You'll now also have in-depth player comparisons for teammates and enemies on every part of the game that makes a League of Legends player good or bad. Don't forget there is a link below to try it out for yourself and let us know what you think. Starting off in the top lane, our S tier roster will be Wukong, Renekton, Maokai, Darius, Mordekaiser, and in God tier, we've got Garen and Nasus. For changes, we have Shyvana top joining the mix to B tier, and if you're going WTF, how does Shyvana top work? Well, it's different than the past iterations of Shyvana top, and would take me approximately, I don't know, just a random number, 8 minutes and 8 seconds to go over. So instead, after finishing this video, feel free to check out our Shyvana top guide as well, as it's a sleeper pick in the meta right now. Similarly, Rengar top will be added back onto the list as B tier, as yet another jungle champion going to the top lane to abuse Bork and Death's Dance. Fiora is a champion that will be moving from S tier to A tier, as her win rate has been decreasing as of late to around 51% in gold, mostly due to matchups, which Fiora is more dependent on compared to other champions, so she loses to things like Wukong, for example, or how she currently loses to the growing population of beefy top laners like Malphite, Maokai, Urgot, Nasus, who are just stomping her, at least in low elo. For the highlighted change, Set is another champion who's fallen out of S tier, and for similar reasons as to Fiora. Not only is Set losing to a lot of popular meta champions like Wukong, but I mean, who isn't? But he also got losing to Maokai, but he's also losing to the new generation of top laners who are getting more popular every single day. Like Malphite because of Whippo, post-buffed Urgot, then you got the niche counter picks like Alawi, Singe, Vayne, Kale, and then you start to realize something. Man, after Set's been nerfed so many times, now his numbers on his W don't automatically make him win every single matchup, and he might actually be vulnerable. And to back up that point, he currently holds a 50% win rate and below 10% pick rate in gold for the first time, I think, since his release, or at least in a lot of months. He's just really fallen from grace in low elo. And as we all know, top lane is the most prone lane to getting completely screwed over by counter picks, and when you have this many, he just isn't going to be S tier anymore, plus the fact that he's been getting nerfed. Moving down to the mighty jungle, our S tier roster will be Master Easy, Amumu, Zac, Shyvana, Trundle, Graves, and Echo, while in God tier, we've got the WW combo of Wukong and Warwick. For the changes, we've got Echo returning to S tier because the jungle XP changes really didn't impact as much as we thought they would, so he's just going back to S. Kane's gonna go from A tier to B tier, and I can just already hear all the K-mains saying, no, he's good, Raw scales so well. Yeah, well, if he scales so well, why does he have 49% win rate? It's just, he's really not that strong right now, but he will be better when those amazing buff to his QCD and the W slow increase come in. I mean, also what Riot could do is release info on how his orbs work, or if they're not willing to do that, at least let Kane choose what form he gets instead of having to randomly decide on what orbs he picked up and they don't even know how it works. Basically, Kane as a champion needs to either function more clearly or get rid of the stupid orb gimmick. Okay, Kane rant done. Kha'Zix will go from A tier to B tier. He's got around a 50% win rate and a 6% pick rate, and it's a very common trend for assassin junglers to not do as well in low elo as what people would think, especially with so many hard losing matchups to the upper end of the tier list, things like Wukong, Nunu, Trundle, Warwick. He just gets absolutely murdered by them, so Kha'Zix is gonna go to B tier. Then we've got Morgana and Ivern are just going to be shipped off the list due to play rate issues. Hopefully you'll see some more Morgana being played so we can add her back to the list, but as our standard policy when we make the list, we tend to make sure it doesn't get too bloated so you know what's actually strong instead of listing every single champion. So when we have to decide on who's getting taken off the list, we just take the lowest play rates as our kind of standard policy, although we do make exceptions. And our last change and the highlighted change will be to Trundle going from A tier to S tier. He is going to get nerfed soon, so abuse this while you can because he's got a 53% win rate, a 5% pick rate in gold, and he's only got a 1% ban rate, so it's really easy to actually pick him. If that doesn't convince you about how strong he is in the low elo jungle meta, he actually only has one losing matchup, and you can probably guess who it is, but I'll kind of give you a couple seconds. Yeah, it's actually to one of the god tier champions. It's Wukong. He is a god slayer though, as he does do well into Warwick, and he does well into other similar kind of bruiser style champions like Lee Sin, Olaf. He's just a ridiculous hard counter to Olaf. And he also really beats tank junglers, which are more popular in low elo. For example, Rammus's Sejuani, really strong. He is essentially the ultimate counter pick to the way the current meta is being played, where everyone's very focused on early game skirmishes, focused on playing melee champions. So the fact that he can beat melee champions in skirmishes early and then outscale them in teamfights is the main reason he's being played both in competitive play and in solo queue. And in the mid lane, our starting S tier roster will be just Katarina, because Fizz and Diana will be placed in God tier. Mid lane in low elo is very strange currently, because most of the champions with the highest play rates are things like Yasuo, Zed, Sylas, LeBlanc, pretty much a bunch of faker wannabes, and then they're not actually close to S tier at all, because the easier to execute overpowered assassins with less skill shots to land are at the top. For one of our bigger changes, Ahri falls out of S tier mostly due to the fact that even though she's the best out of the A tier champions in terms of stats with a 52% win rate and 7% pick rate, this isn't enough to actually put her into S tier with the rest of the competition being so strong. And when you kind of do the eyeball check, I doubt people are really scared of an Ahri 1v9ing a game compared to things like Fizz or Diana. I mean, you just feel so helpless when you try and fight a Fizz or Diana when they're ahead, but when you're up against an Ahri who's fed, I mean, there's still ways to beat her. Our next change to the list will be Sylas going from A tier to B tier. I know he's a super popular champion in high elo, and he's also very popular in low elo, but his win rate was increasing as of late after people learned that you should probably max W into E, but it's stabilized now at around an 8% pick rate, but only a 49% win rate. Yes, he is a difficult champion, and so his win rate's going to get dragged down by that. So, you know, instead of putting in like 100 games of Sylas, maybe instead of that put 2 games onto Diana, and you'll likely do better on Diana than you did on Sylas. That means that our last change of the list will be one of my favorite mid laners, Orianna, going from B tier to A tier. It's actually really rare for control mages like her to do well in solo queue, but her kit does suit this meta very well, and that's why you see her in competitive play. She's able to buff out the front line to engage easier, give people a shield, and there's a lot of champions she can use to hit a really easy shockwave. Not to mention, because everyone's melee, everyone's just bunched up in general. That's really what her strengths come from. She's one of the most well-rounded mages, and when playing her, I highly recommend you go Phase Rush in solo queue, although if you're an Apto fanboy like me, you can probably try Spellbook, but Phase Rush does do better in solo queue. The real difference maker for her though on this patch was the buffs to her W movement speed, which helps her escape ganks and also dodge skill shots, while the EAP ratio gives her a little bit more utility during the teamfight phase. It might seem kind of minor, but it actually buffed up her win rate from a 48% to a 51 in gold, because escaping ganks is one of her biggest issues. When you play Orianna, you get ganked all the time, but that extra movement speed allows her to dodge skill shots, dodge cocoon, dodge whatever you need to, or just simply walk away, which is really nice for her. For the ball lane S tier roster, we have Jinx, Jhin, Caitlyn, Vayne, and Ashe, while in God tier, we have Simply Misfortune. Kai'Sa is going to be the only change we have to the AD carry list this patch, and she's going to go from A tier to B tier. You can already hear the thousands of furious Kai'Sa mains typing in the comments, oh no, she's really good, people love her in high elo, she's so popular, but she sucks in low elo, and it's really bad. She's got a 47% win rate, but a 15% pick rate in gold, and in the past, people would argue that, oh man, she's mechanically difficult and people aren't even using the proper build. Except this time around, you can't use that excuse, because the proper build for Kai'Sa right now in solo queue in terms of win rate is Halo Blades with Mono Moon Rage Blade into AP, which is actually her most used even in low elo. So there's no real excuse. Kai'Sa is just not in the right place in the meta right now. To kind of further my argument on that one, she's one of the only champions I think I've ever seen currently have a 0 winning matchup stat-wise in gold. The closest is actually versus Aphelios, who is not really that good of a matchup for her. She just happens to be one of the only champions with a lower overall win rate than Kai'Sa in gold. And that's because he's been nerfed ridiculous amounts of times in a row. Low elo AD carry is already hard enough, okay? Do not make it harder on yourself by picking Kai'Sa. There's other fun AD carries that exist that are good. Last up for the Q&A section, we have the support S tier roster of Lulu Leona, and then the God tier of Blitzcrank Nami. For the changes, Sona drops out of S tier to A tier. Even though her win rate is quite high at around a 54% win rate, she only has a 3% pick rate. Compare that to Nami, who's got that same win rate, but triple the play rate, while also not declining in power the lower in the bracket that you actually go, like other enchanters. Then you can kind of see there's a big difference between the two. Not to mention, Sona is the weakest enchanter in lane, even Yumi's probably better than her, and anti-enchanter champions like Pyke and Blitz are so popular right now that you can kind of see why Sona's falling out of popularity. Maokai support will also drop from A tier to B tier, but can likely make it back to A tier once other supports are nerfed. While Brand, the ultimate low-elo mage support, isn't doing as hot this patch, as he peaks specifically in silver as an S tier champion, but in gold or above, or even bronze or below, he is around A tier, so we made the adjustment to make him A tier overall. That means that our highlighted change will be Lulu from A tier to S tier. She has currently a 51.5% win rate, but a 9% pick rate, which might seem a little bit low for an S tier champion, but let me explain. We've made an exception for her due to how well she transitions into High-ELO. Lulu's win rate doesn't drop drastically when he goes silver or below, but once you hit platinum or diamond or master tier, it starts to skyrocket. So she's more of a really strong transition champion where if you're able to main her from silver to gold, you'll just keep being able to main her on your journey. I will mention some tips when playing her though to increase her win rate, because her win rate technically should be a little bit higher. You should be swapping between Guardian and Aerie depending on the matchups, where Guardian you should be using them when you're scared of getting all in, which is pretty often in this meta. Also, you should be swapping between Relic Shield and Spell Thief, because Spell Thief should only really be used in very easy matchups, and most of them Relic Shield is actually performing better in terms of win rate. For matchups, Ezreal's really popular, so really avoid picking Lulu with Ezreal, but outside of that, she has really good synergy with Twitch, Yasuo, Vayne, Kog'Maw, Jinx, Tristana, and somewhat Draven and Misfortune. And if you're at this point in time, you're like, wow, that's a lot of champions she's really good with. Well, yeah, that's because she's really good champion and makes those champions become S or A tier. Like Kog'Maw without Lulu, terrible. Kog'Maw with Lulu, you know, wins LEC. So when you start to think about, man, yeah, she has some really strong combos in the meta, that's why she deserves to be S tier despite kind of a lowish win rate. At least compared to Nami, the other enchanter. First up for the Q&A portion, we have Chris Hughes, I'm sorry, I'm really bad at pronouncing names, from YouTube, who asked, why don't we see Diana jungle? She seems like she has the kit and sustain to do well there. So funny enough, as far as I'm aware, Diana was specifically designed to be a jungler, at least to also be a jungler as well as a mid laner, and so yeah, that's why she has the kit for it. But the numbers just aren't there. She's not performing. She only has a 48% win rate and a 1% pick rate. But, you know, why is that? In her past iteration, she did bad in the jungle because her early game dueling was far too weak, but her current iteration is actually pretty good at this. The real issue with Diana jungle is itemization combined with how she needs to snowball. When you look at an item like Runic Echoes, it's not terrible on Diana, but its equivalent Ludens is not built on her in mid lane because she needs other important damage items like Nashor's or Deathcap, or even Protobelt or Zhonya's who have better utility and damage aspects than Runic Echoes. Then you remember things like Assassin junglers do worse in low elo because they offer no utility from behind, and Diana in particular needs to go into fights and can't really dance around with invisibility like other Assassin junglers. So you actually need to be even more ahead on something like Diana jungle to even teamfight, so you need to get your Zhonya's pretty early. And if you rush it from behind, you don't deal damage. And if you don't rush it from behind, you don't deal damage because you're dead and you're not Karthus, alright? So that's why, you know, Diana might not really work in low elo. So for a quick summary, it's mostly due to itemization issues from the jungle. So even if you were to skip Runic Echoes, the income is too low to get her items fast enough into the game to teamfight properly. Next up, Agent Schwartz asked, did Maokai receive any buffs recently? Because I'm just seeing him everywhere now, and it's like he came out of nowhere. Nope, my boy Treeman Maokai did not receive any direct buffs. He's actually been sitting at a high win rate for most of the season, but in particular right after the Sunfire Cape buffs, which enabled him to more easily win the laning phase. Then when Death's Dance and Bork got buffed, top lane reintroduced dash-based bruisers into the meta, which Maokai is a huge counter to. So though he did not receive any individual changes, he got an item buff that helps him win lane, then other items were buffed that allowed him to win lane more often due to the better matchups. Then you add in enchanters into the meta that make him even more unkillable, and you got yourself a very powerful Amau tree. Honestly, he should have been more popular sooner, but because he's one of the least main champions in the game due to kind of having this boring stigma, although I think he's fun. He's very similar to Sivir. People will not play Maokai until he reaches his current state of power, and he's just way too strong to be ignored anymore. Our next question comes from Marco Sartori on Twitter, who said basically he's talking about Malzahar top lane and how it's becoming popular in Korea with a high win rate, and is curious why. So funny enough, Malzahar top lane, not just this season, not last season, but for most of the time that Malzahar's been a viable champion, has actually been pretty good in the top lane. Very similar to Zilean for the most part. They're strong top laners in terms of their win rates because they can bully out melee champions to get a free chance to scale, so the win rate is nothing new. But what interested me is that he was potentially being played more, so I thought I'd take a look into this trend myself to see what's up, and found that his pick rate is still incredibly low at 0.2%, even in Korea specifically, and his win rate was only an average of 52% depending on which bracket you use, which stat site, you know, but the average still went to around 52%, but I couldn't find the number that you mentioned, which was 56. So if you want to put that in the comment section of the video, I'd be glad to check it out. So what I want to do with answering this question is actually go over how to properly collect data and analyze it, because sometimes you can be a little bit off with it. First up, very similar to when you're handing in a project at school or a research project, you need more than one source. And then all you're going to do for the win rates is take the average of it. It's going to give you a more accurate representation. Then after you've done that, you need to judge the accuracy of the data that you just pulled in, which in this particular case will be sample size. When sample size is this low with champions like Malzahar top lane, it can be a little deceiving. I'll give you an example. So if some dude plays Fiddlesticks top lane with crit and you're trying to track how good Fiddlesticks top lane is, and you randomly see that, man, oh my god, has a 100% win rate this week, well, maybe the guy just played like 10 games and won all of them because he was lucky. You know what I mean? It doesn't mean Fiddlesticks top is good. So I just want to kind of issue out a warning when you're looking into these stat sites, because it's super common nowadays to do. But make sure you're checking different sources and make sure you check the sample size, alright? That means that our last question will be from Instagram from Terror_Absoluto, who asked, why is Renekton suddenly S tier? Oh man, love me some easy questions to answer. Alright, so your answer will be Bork and Death Dance. But, I mean, I guess you're probably looking for something more specific. So Renekton is an early game champion who struggled to find a proper build path after the removal of Essence Reaver. When Bork and Death Dance were changed though, /buffed, he gained the ability to both hard snowball the laning phase due to the early Bork, but also have the Death Dance to help him teamfight, which means his primary job and win condition will be so much easier to do. Sure, he still sucks in the late game, but this new build path has such a massive win rate impact on him. I'll give you an example actually. His old build, which is just barely more popular in low elo, has a 49 to 50% win rate with Black Cleaver first. His new build with Blade of the Rune King first has around a 52% win rate with almost the same pick rate and sample size of around 150,000 games. So with that, you can really see from the numbers how big of a difference proper itemization or just item paths in general can have on a champion. So especially a champion like Renekton, who needs to snowball and needs to do well in mid game fights, he needs a really strong item path, and without it, he's not a good champion. But that's it. Thanks everyone for watching. Be sure to check out our other content on this channel, as well as our site at mobalytics.gg. As always, I'm your host, Adam Moriarty Isles. May the new and old Silicu gods be with you.